Hey guys, Tania Rubin with our Wine Country Realtor. It's episode 6 of Temecula Uncorked, and I am here today with Nick Palumbo from Palumbo Family Vineyards. So happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me, Nick.
Well, sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we jump into our conversation today, I'm just going to do a quick quality check and make sure we are streaming the correct direction on Facebook, and then we will jump right into our conversation with Nicholas. So I am over here. I'm going to look at it and see what we've got. Feeding. Do not like this technical stuff, but last night in my test, some of them were crooked and some of them were not. It looks like we are good to go. We are the right direction. So hooray for that. Let's actually pull that up, because maybe if I see some comments and questions, we will be able to answer them there. Awesome. All right. Again, thank you, Nicholas. Sorry for the technical delays and details. I keep on trying to iron them out, and they keep on coming at me.
Yeah. I'm glad you're here, because we would not be live right now if it was up to me.
Kind of fun. So I did a little research before I came, because Nick and I, this is our first time meeting, and you have a really interesting background. I want to say, like, going from, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, a musician, professional musician, to a professional chef trained at the Culinary Institute in New York.
Not the CIA, no.
Not the...
Yeah, I'm going to back up. I was actually a lifeguard, ocean lifeguard surfer, and that's what I wanted to be my entire life, but I got distracted. Yeah.
You got distracted?
I did,
By music?
Music led me to New York, and then food. Then my training was at a small school in Manhattan.
Okay.
Yeah, I moved to Manhattan, and because of the music, I moved to Manhattan. And then when I was done with that, I realized I was a little bit maturing and getting ready to move on in life, and I ended up going to a chef school in Manhattan that was not the CIA, but it was a new school for social research. And it was more of a crash course kind of school, but they had great externships, which put me in some really nice restaurants in New York.
Right, and then you ended up in San Diego, and you're working as a professional chef.
Yes.
And you take a drive through Temecula wine country and say, "This is my new life."
That's that's pretty much how it happened, and it was really like within 30 days.
30.
Yeah.
And we're back in like 1998 to set the stage.
Yeah.
So Temecula looked like what? Tell me your picture of Temecula in 1998.
I'll paint the picture a little better. I was born and raised San Diego.
Okay.
And went to New York to do those other goofy things after college.
Okay.
I was one of those forever college kids. I went to every JC in San Diego and a little bit of San Diego State. And went to Manhattan and did my music and then the chefing and the training there. When I came back, I was back in San Diego and had access to a small cabin up in Idlewild, which is directly the other direction of what your viewers are facing, the mountains out behind us here.
And about 40, no, maybe an hour and 15.
Yeah, about an hour away from Temecula, and so that puts it about 2 hours from San Diego, which I was living in San Diego at the time.
Okay.
And got a job at a restaurant up there, a seasonal job, and I was driving...
In Idlewild.
In Idlewild.
Okay.
I'm sorry, yes. So I was living in San Diego, and got a job up in Idlewild, the
commuting to Idlewild.
Well, I had a small cabin, not mine, but access to a cabin.
Okay.
So I did take the job, and while I was up there, the days that I was working, I stayed there, and then I'd go back. That being said, halfway between San Diego and Idlewild is Temecula. And I happened to see a sign that said Temecula Wine Country. I pulled off one day, and at the time, I pulled off, this is the highway that's on the southern end of the valley.
This is the old highway at that time.
The old highway.
The old highway. Believe it or not, if you guys are into Temecula, most people who are here now know this, but there was a highway that connected San Diego to Riverside that was a multi-lane freeway. It was a winding mountain, two-lane excursion.
It was, two-lane, and you didn't want to be on it at night very often. It was dangerous. But anyways, long story short, I saw the sign, I pulled off, I went to the 2 wineries that I thought existed, and after about 6 months...
So which 2 wineries are we talking about? We're talking about Bella...
That was actually, the first winery I ever pulled into was Keyways, which is still there, but the original owner, Carl Keys, he's no longer there, hasn't been for a long time.
Sure.
And then I drove up the road and went to Filsinger, which is now Danza del Sol.
Okay.
Yeah, so... I thought that those were the 2 wineries that they were talking about in Temecula for about a couple months.
Okay.
And somebody else I met said, no, there's a bunch of other wineries, you have to go to the other side. A bunch of other wineries at that time was 14 total. So there were 14 wineries in the valley, and it intrigued me. I was back from New York. I was looking for a direction in life beyond chefing.
Okay.
And I just stumbled into this property. I just so happened to pull a flyer from a listing of one of the homes with land out here, and was blown away at the time at how inexpensive, hindsight's 20/20, it was inexpensive, looking
The
back.
land was inexpensive.
Yes.
The adventure that would follow was probably not so much.
We're in deep now. Yeah. So anyway, that's what brought me to Temecula.
Okay, so you find a flyer, and you're like, I think I'm going to go make some wine.
I didn't think at any point that I was going to be a winery.
Okay.
I did not purchase this property thinking winery. I thought, after a lot of discussion with my family, said I
So
think
at this point you're married?
No.
You're not
No.
married.
Yeah.
But
I rolled in single and
Okay.
and got lucky in a lot of ways. One is that I found this property, and 2 that after moving into the valley, I found a great gal.
You certainly did.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're not married, you're single, you're driving back and forth to Idlewild, and you stumble across this property, and you make it happen.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, was this-
Originally, it was just vineyards. There were vineyards here and a home, and the buildings surrounding us right now, those were garages. And I bought the property thinking possibly a B&B someday. Honestly, I thought that, but realistically, a single guy running a B&B didn't really sound like it would fly in a lot of ways.
You're like, I'll cook breakfast.
Yeah, I'll do something.
But you
Yeah.
sort of saw potential.
Saw a
and
lot
you
of potential.
Didn't know what that meant at the time.
Correct.
You just kind of bought it flying blind.
There were 7 acres planted here, and
Okay.
it was under contract with one of the local wineries.
So there was some revenue on the property.
There was revenue, and that's what made me do the deal.
Okay.
There was an existing contract, there was revenue, it was a great price, and ultimately I knew even if I didn't fall in love with the lifestyle, I thought I would, but I knew there was an out, and it was probably a good business decision at the time. Not realizing that in the future I'd end up being a winery. I just thought this is a good property to buy, good place, potential lifestyle.
So you saw it as a good opportunity, and you jumped, and the next thing you know, you're growing grapes, which you'd never done before.
No.
Now, did you keep the management company with that the grapes were under contract with, or did you find did you immediately take over? How did that happen?
No, it was a great situation, because at the time it was the winery that was purchasing the fruit also managed the property.
Okay.
So that was part of the contract, which was great, because I could come in, move in, keep doing my chefing down in San Diego or Idlewild, wherever I wanted to do it, and just watch. So the learning curve was super steep, but I like to fall back on saying that I'm genetically programmed for this and didn't realize it. My father's Sicilian, the stories of all the Italian families with the basement homemade wines and all of that, that's in my genes somewhere, as well as my mom's side, Illinois farm girl. So.
And then you grew up in your parents' farm.
Well,
or not in the farm, but like in the garden. All the time.
That was always in the garden all the time, yeah. And in the kitchen. That was always part of our identity, our family identity, was the Illinois farming side. So genetically programmed for it, but didn't realize it at the time. I moved in and found out immediately that it was right for me. It did fit who I am, and yeah, it just happened really quick.
I think that if you had that instinct to come in here and sort of make that leap, there was something in your inner core telling you that this was for you.
Yeah.
It sounds like a lot of that choice, even though there was a smart business side of it, was also you had something tugging.
There was something tugging, but I'll be honest with you. At one of the visits up here to this property, my dad and my brother, one of my brothers, was with me, and they both looked at me and they both said, "Nick, you may or may not realize this, but this is you. You need to do this deal." So they were really encouraging.
I was going to be my next question was, what did your family think?
They pushed. They pushed hard.
They pushed. They loved it.
But they're also pretty sharp,
Okay.
in terms of business and those types of decisions. They realized that it was right for me, but at the same time, they saw the deal, and they said, "Look, even if you just hate this place in a year, you're going to be okay with it."
Right.
So it was just, honestly, I'd love to say I had this, great foresight and I was a brilliant move and all of that, but really it was just dumb luck, right place at the right time.
You were driving through the right community.
Exactly.
That is so crazy. So before we jump into some of what happened between then and now, tell me what Temecula looked like in 1998 outside of wine country, because it has gone through, I just posted this week on the page, I don't know if you saw it, but a picture of Pachanga in 1995 to today, and it is, if you haven't seen it, you gotta look. It's like a night and day transformation. I imagine that's the case with.
Was the picture of the trailers?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
They were trailers. I'm not a big gambler. I enjoy a casino every once in a while, but I remember going over there when I first got here, and yeah, it was literally a couple trailers.
How many stoplights are we talking about in town?
Well, along what is known as 79 South, which is Pachanga Parkway now, I think there was one, possibly
one stoplight.
two.
No,
maybe a stoplight and a stop sign, I think. Maybe.
No 15.
No.
No. Was it under construction?
When I moved in, 15 was there. Yes.
Oh, the 15 was there when you moved in.
Yeah.
So it was just finishing as you were doing your commute, maybe, or kind of in that era.
It's interesting. 98, it was well on its way, but it certainly wasn't there yet. Like I said, there was 14 wineries. There were, maybe one or two gas stations along the main thoroughfares.
Marketing-wise, hardware stores.
We're
talking pre-Home Depot. We're talking.
Well, let me put it this way: when I'd come up from San Diego, my family's in San Diego. If I didn't eat dinner down there and it was beyond 8 or 9 at night, I wasn't eating that night. You couldn't drive through a fast food place up here. That's
kind of not unlike if you live in wine country and you want to get takeout.
Yeah, exactly.
There's like a couple that will, but typically if you want to eat out in wine country, there's only a couple of options after 8 on a weekday.
Yeah.
On the weekends, you're pretty good, but on a weekday, you got to head into town to get food. So
but back then, there was no headed to town.
There was nowhere to head.
Yeah.
This was it.
Yeah.
Wow. What you have seen a lot.
Yeah, and actually, I just I was honored to speak at an event for one of the early pioneers of wine country, Joe Hart. And it was amazing as putting together my thoughts on what I wanted to say about him. One of the things that struck me was that I am one of the few fortunate ones that have kind of spanned the early pioneers to what's happening now, and where wine country Temecula, or Temecula as a whole, is going. Really, I'm really fortunate that I had that opportunity to work amongst and with, actually being taken under the wing by some of the early pioneers of Temecula and the wine country in particular.
Which is a perfect segue to where I wanted to go next. So you're here, you're growing grapes, and you are taking in everything you can.
Absolutely.
And you decide that, you know what, maybe I want to try this winemaking thing. How do we go from growing the grapes to deciding you want to try and make your own wines?
Well, our personal tongue-in-cheek joke about it is, my wife said to me, why don't you stop selling fruit and start making it yourself? I'm tired of seeing people screw your fruit up. And that's our joke. That's our joke. Our vineyard had a really, really good reputation and was highly sought after by most, if not all, the wineries in the valley at the time. So we had that going for us, and I knew that. I worked at a few of the wineries. My first job was at, I mentioned Phil Singer. My first job was at Phil Singer. I worked at Salurzo a little bit. Helped try to start another place briefly, and realized that my position there wasn't really necessary. So that's about where I decided, well, you know what, I think I'm done working at other places. My wife said, let's do this, and just jumped in, 100%.
Your wife just chimed in. Thanks, Cindy. We're having fun.
Yeah.
Thanks for
Oh,
tuning
hey,
in.
there she is.
Yeah, she's there. So fun. That is, so you're watching you're kind of working at some of the wineries, getting some experience. Cindy says, you could do this.
Yeah.
And you mentioned a few times that you were fortunate to have some mentors take you under their wing. So who do you go to at that point when you're like, I think you're right, I'm gonna go and do this? Who are the two people or three that you go and talk to?
That's what's amazing about this valley back then, and it continues today. There's a lot more people involved out here now, so it's not as tight of a community. That being said, I think anybody out here at this point, if something really went down, I think everybody would step up to help out. And not think, I know that for a fact. But in the past, there was only a handful of us. Every single one of them, whether it be the growers, meaning just the people with the vineyards, or the wineries, they were all very open with sharing knowledge as well as equipment. There was never a question if you had something happen. There was never a question. You could just go to just about anybody. That being said, when I first decided to open a winery, I had been selling my fruit to other wineries. And
they may not have been so happy to lose your fruit too, from the sounds.
No, there was a few that were disappointed. A few asked that, well, are you going to sell any still? And the answer was no. But
yeah.
Anyways,
But what's good for the valley is truly good for all of the wineries.
And that's true.
Yeah.
And that's absolutely true. And everybody, I think, feels that way today. That what is rising sea rises all boats. How does that saying go?
Yep.
But anyway, high tide rises all boats. I went to, first and foremost, I knew when I opened I wanted to have wines to sell. You don't just decide to open and then start selling wines if you want to have
wines
a state.
take a little time to
Wines
develop.
take time to develop. You can buy bulk wines, but I wanted to have my own wines. So
Sure.
I went to Salurzo, Vince Salurzo, at Salurzo Winery, which is now Belvino.
Okay.
No, is it Belvino? No, what's the...
Bella
Anyway,
Vista?
Bella Vista.
Okay.
Thank you. So I went to Vince and I said, I'm thinking about opening a winery. Is there any chance I could get some of the wine back from my fruit? And Vince, it blew me away that Vince said, absolutely. He said, here's a piece of chalk and here's a wine thief, which is to take a sample out of the barrels. He said, go through and pick out the barrels that you want.
Wow.
Yeah, and then I put a
Wow.
chalk mark on the barrels that I wanted. So I don't think anybody would do that again. Say pick out your best barrels.
Well,
and go
it's
ahead and take
probably
them.
a testament to you and the relationships you must have had in that time, because you, even if you're being generous, like that is something that you do for a friend.
Yeah,
That is something
and
that
there was
you
a
do
lot of
for-
handshake deals, and I've always been a firm believer in handshake deals, and we always had one. So we had a very good relationship.
And he
mutual
was
respect.
like, you know what, Godspeed, and that was your first lift.
That was it, yeah. And I do have to say, give a nod to the people who followed up with that. So Vince said, sure, I haven't bottled it yet, go ahead and pick your barrels. So I
Wow.
picked my barrels, but then I had to move it somewhere. I was in the process of getting bonded, which is becoming a legal winery, and I needed to move the wines around, do my blending, do my bottling, and all of that. So there was several, my first vintage, which was 2000, meaning the grapes were picked in 2000, the wines were made at Salurzo, and then I opened in 2002, so I had that wine ready to go. I moved the wine from, and I forget the order, but it spent some time at Wilson Creek. They were just opening,
Okay.
and they were kind enough to let me move the wines over there and do some blending there.
Okay.
And then I was working at Phil Singer, like I mentioned, and he allowed me to move the wines over to there. And
Refresh my memory, which winery was that?
Phil Singer
is
now Danza.
Danza.
also.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
So I moved the wine over there,
Okay.
and we did some bottling, and then I think I had case goods, and just prior to opening, I I may have had them at another winery, I forget. But anyways, everybody was really helpful in
These
open arms.
these wines traveled.
They did. But that being said, that was 2002, and then
Yes.
in 2002, I was bonded in July, and I had my first official crush here at our property in 2002. So I had my wines from 2000 and 2001 that were from another winery, but my fruit.
Your fruit.
Now in 2002, now we're all caught up.
Wow. What a story.
Yeah, if I tried to do it again, it wouldn't happen.
Yeah, and if you tried to plan it and go, okay, here's the plan, I'm going to do this, and then if you'd look at yourself and go, that's crazy, that will never happen.
Absolutely.
But because it happened organically, all the pieces just came together as you're like, oh, wait, I need this. You figured out how to get that to happen.
Yeah, and you have to be, in the early days of winemaking, at least certainly mine and most everybody else's experience, is you have to be a bit of a MacGyver.
Sure.
Meaning you have to be able to fix something with a roll of duct tape and a pack of bubble gum.
Well, and I'm also going to, I don't know this to be a fact, but winemaking is often seen as a wealthy family activity or something that they'll do, to supplement other business effort, and so they'll take profits from other businesses to support that endeavor and that dream. And I'm guessing that was not the case right. So you're going into an arena where it's extremely cost, prohibitive, and there's all these expenses, and trying to just make this dream happen.
Yeah. The perception is there, and for a good reason. I've often said that owning and operating a winery is kind of like owning a racehorse. It's a rich man's sport, and in most cases that's the truth. There are other ways to do it. I'm not going to look back and say, I came from a poor family that couldn't afford to put food on the table. That's certainly not the case. My family is extremely talented and successful in their business endeavors. That being said, I came into this with loans, and Home Depot was my best friend.
Mm-hmm.
I bought a hammer and I swung it, and everything that you see in the background, I actually physically, I painted the buildings, I insulated the buildings, I oversaw the entire construction. I was I didn't hire somebody to build this place for me. I knew what I wanted, and if I didn't know how to do it, I did the research to figure it out.
Before YouTube.
That's right. Oh God, yeah.
Now you can go.
Yeah.
But I do feel like in the Temecula Valley we have our fair share of kind of pioneer winemakers.
Yeah.
That while we have some of the big winemakers, we also have some of the smaller artisanal, as I know you like to be referred to as an artisanal, smaller family wineries, which is one of the real treats, if you haven't visited here, is to see that combination. We do have some of the larger wineries that obviously have made some big budgets, have some larger budgets for their settings and their setup and large staff, and then there's a number of smaller mom and pop where you'll actually go in and you're going to see the winemakers running around and see the families that run it, which is, I think, part of the charm.
Yeah. I'm always careful to point out that just because I do it, our way, we're artisanal. We live here on property. We make the wines. Just because we do it the way we do it doesn't mean we feel that these other properties are any less important. And
well, we need diversity.
Yeah.
And I mean, if we didn't have those larger wineries, I mean, you certainly wouldn't have the capacity here to take some of the volume that the...
Yeah, and we prefer not. I always like to think of it in this way, is that the people that don't really know much about Temecula or wines for that matter, they're just touristing. They need a place to stay, and what they'll do is they'll look at the couple places that attract them, and usually that's the larger wineries, the resort style places. They get a room and they go out wine tasting to all the popular places, the big places, and then they'll sit in their rooms that evening and look at the brochure for local, and they say, oh, wait a minute, this place looks pretty good. So then they'll come find me on the second day, and that's fine. And that's just feeding. It's feeding down to all of the smaller wineries that that rely on that type of business.
But have the larger ones have the marketing budget and will
Yeah.
bring in and give a base for,
Right.
have meals for,
Yeah.
have the kitchens to serve those full, and then you can find these boutique artisanal experiences off the beaten track.
Yeah.
So going to those experiences, now that you guys have been here and are obviously very familiar, what are your favorite 2 or 3 wineries to go and visit when you have a spare minute in your life? Which I know this is all a supposition, because there's very few spare minutes when you're running a business like
Well,
this.
not just the business. I'm going to kind of joke with myself a little bit and say that between 4 children, 2 of which are in college, and 1 works here full time, and then we have a younger son that's in local schools. Between having 4 children and a fishing boat, I don't get around much tasting. And honestly, to be honest, when I do taste other wineries' wines, it's usually with one of the perks is getting to know all these winemakers and being friends with them. So when I am tasting the wines from other wineries, it's usually a winemaker sharing it, and it's usually one of their best wines, because they're not going to share anything other than that. So I'm tasting really, really good wines from the entire valley. That being said, I always do say that there's a well-worn path between our place here at Palumbo and Hart Winery I mentioned earlier, and Doffo, which is further out. There's a well-worn path between those. That's not to say that our neighbors right down the street here, Lorenzi, obviously we're on the same street and we have the same approach and sensibility towards wine. So I'm sure we share a lot of the same customers. But personally, I don't really get out and wine taste very often.
They don't let you off the ranch enough, and when you do, you're running to go fishing or hunting.
Exactly. Yeah.
That is so. It is the winemaker, like the shoemaker with no shoes.
Exactly.
You're too busy to enjoy.
I've always said, if you want to stop doing what you love doing, start a business doing it.
That said, I feel like in the winemaking industry there really is such a passion and a drive to keep you going that you have to love it, and that probably, well, you might not love some of the business details of it, like maybe dealing with the taxes and the state regulations and some of those tedious parts of any business.
Yeah, it's overwhelming.
Yeah.
It is overwhelming, but you know what, we constantly remind ourselves, and we're one of the few and very fortunate families to live on property. What you're looking at in the background right now is actually not only our winery and our tasting room, our production facility, but it's also my child's playground. We throw football back behind us, during the sunsets and after school.
And I will definitely take some pictures and post them, because you guys are like, this is a stunning. These are the days that you live for when you live in Temecula. The weather is perfect.
It's beautiful. Yeah.
It's not too hot. The vines are behind us. There's a light breeze blowing. It is truly spectacular. It's God's country right now.
And really, that was my point, is that even on the worst days, I have to look up and look around and say, it's really not that bad.
And the stars up here at night.
It's beautiful.
Phenomenal. It was one of the things when we first moved here that just blew my mind, was the Palomar Observatory. There's actually light restrictions in what we can do out here, and so it keeps the skies darker, and the stars are just brilliant.
Isn't it nice on a moonless night? You can actually still see the Milky Way, and you can't say that for a lot of places in Southern California now.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about cycling back to the wine and wine quality, you were saying that you get to taste the best of the best. And often, my own personal knowledge, you guys, Lorenzi, GBV, many of these, boutique wineries that are making really high quality wines and wines, and that are getting awards, and doing exceptionally well, and yet Temecula has difficulty on a national, international wine level getting respect. True? False?
That was true.
Was true. Okay.
Yeah,
So
this valley certainly has had its struggles with its reputation.
okay.
What
I like to talk about the elephant in the room, right?
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
let's get it out there, put it on the table,
My-
because I'm always
yeah.
going, but there's some amazing
Yeah.
wines out here.
Yeah.
You just have to know where to find them.
I honestly, this conversation is and don't mean to mean any offense, but it's an older conversation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nowadays, we used to be the Rodney Dangerfields of the valley. But we still make good wines, and that's not the conversation anymore. What I have found is when and been here long enough to have this personal experience, I do remember going to other valleys and going to UC Davis for courses or Sacramento for conventions, and you would hear the rumblings and the questions and about the quality. You don't hear that anymore. In fact, now what I hear, not only in our tasting room but also when I travel, is how great things have turned around down here. So it is an older conversation. It's certainly one that I don't mind having.
Well, and it's funny because we moved here and I wasn't familiar with Temecula's history and heard that rumbling, kind of from where we were in Los Angeles, a little bit of a rumbling, and then moved here, and and I'm not a wine aficionado. I enjoy wine, but certainly would never place myself as highly educated. But I have done some wine education, and I was enjoying the wines I was experiencing here, and I was like, well, I don't know, So it was, my experience was kind of coming in after a lot of that evolution had already occurred, but the conversation still lingered.
The conversation does still linger, and the problem I see with that is it's being continued by people who haven't come back.
Okay.
And so yes, you do have people that are naysayers and say, "Oh no, Temecula." So well, honestly, when was the last time you were there? And they say, "Oh man, it's been years. I won't go back." Well, things have changed radically. Not only in the vineyards, but in the cellars themselves. Most importantly, certainly in the vineyards, but in the cellars are much different now than they were in the past. There was a lot of, even if there was good potential out of the vineyards, there was flawed issues in the cellars with spoilage issues and uncleanliness in the past at certain places, and that's all disappeared for the most part.
So when you talk about the cellars, are you talking about the storage and the keeping of the grapes and the crush after they've been harvested until they're bottled?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just
So
to clarify
the types
for some
of
people
vines
that might not be as familiar.
Right, the processing facility. Yeah. So everything from the vines themselves, the types of vines we're growing, the focus in the vines that are here, the farming is certainly leaps and bounds ahead of what it was. And so is the cellar work, the vinification, the winemaking it's a whole different story here.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, but was Temecula not actually California's first wine growing region?
If you go way
back?
yeah. Actually, there is a vineyard on the reservation just south of us, Pachanga.
Okay.
There is a vineyard that they're in the process now at UC Davis doing the DNA fingerprinting and finding out truly if it was one of the early cuttings from the missionaries that came through.
Right.
So we're talking
the mission in Oceanside owned all of this land, kind of from the ocean all the way back through the Temecula Valley, and the monks and that mission planted here.
Correct.
And then there was disease, I believe, that wiped it out in the late 1800s.
Correct. So some of the mission grapes, early on mission grapes, they came from the missions, and that's where they got the name. But anyways, there are plantings from back then. But more recently, the history is 1960s. So some of the top names in the wine industry from up north, Andre Chalestchev was one of them, a famous name from Napa Valley area. Dick Brake was a researcher at UC Davis, among a few others, came down and researched the area and told the early purveyors, absolutely, this is a viable region. And so starting in the early 60s is really where our history starts. But to be honest with you, over the last 10 years, the history has been kind of restarted, repositioned, now going forward, it's a whole different valley in terms of not only the visitors, the quality of wine, the quality of experience,
the quality of the food.
Quality of the food, everything is. We pushed restart, and it's pretty amazing.
Well, I've been fortunate that I visited Napa a few times, visited the Paso Robles area, visited north of Los Angeles, the Santa Ynez wine growing area, sideways, that territory. And I will say, even before we moved here, and when I found the area, I was blown away with what a phenomenal experience Temecula is from a visitor's perspective. It is just so lovely having all of these fabulous wineries, so nice and close to each other, and so diverse, and so many unique personalities, that I think that it does provide a phenomenal experience to people who are coming to visit and have that wine tasting day or weekend or
I will say the city, the county, everybody involved, the tourism board, everybody has done a phenomenal job at all of that. I love what's been done here. I love what people are doing here and the future of it. One thing I do have to differentiate myself from that is they're all friends, and I work and appreciate everything they do. There's a few of us, myself included, I'll speak for myself, that I feel my job is not that, because it's handled. Somebody else is doing that and they're doing a great job at it. What my job is to make the best wine possible. And
keep it micro.
Yeah, and there are people who work with the Visitors Bureau and all of that. They know full well that I support them from behind the scenes. They're doing an amazing job. So my job is
keep making great wine.
It's really simple.
So before we finish up, let's jump on to a couple of we've gone to some fun places. I think it's been really interesting to hear your perspective on the valley. When you've had this background as a professional chef and kind of touched on food, we've talked about wineries. When you want to eat, what are your favorite restaurants in the area?
That's a great question. And again, I've kind of
I know
maybe
you're spoiled.
Well, I'm spoiled. I'll sidestep that question a bit. I'll mention a couple of restaurants. That being said, part of what we are and who we are and what we do here is we raise our own animals. We're kind of a whole system here. We're not just a facility that makes wine. We farm here. We raise our animals for personal consumption. My youngest is active in 4-H. And he raises animals. So we eat very well at home. I mentioned fishing. I fish a lot. And I just got back from a hunting trip in Colorado, and so our freezers are full. And having the chefing background, we enjoy most of our meals at home from really good quality sourced.
I'm going to be waiting for our invitation now.
We'll have some venison. But
just
anyways,
tell my husband it's beef.
Honestly, well, I won't go into that. My wife's favorite protein right now is venison.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's if it's harvested correctly and handled right
and
prepared well, it's an amazing.
I think that's the case with so many foods.
Absolutely.
But if you're not cooking, to
if
back
I'm not
you
cooking,
into a corner.
All over the place. There's a young chef in the valley, just opened a place. Haven't eaten at his restaurant, but I've had his food.
He's done a chef maker's dinner here,
yes,
I believe.
Yeah, JR.
JR,
Yeah,
absolutely.
Is it LATiTUDE?
LATiTUDE by JR in Old Town. We were there, I think, two episodes ago. We went down and talked to Jacoda and JR. Amazing couple.
They are. Yeah, young guy, and he's fiery. He's really into it. The winemaker dinner that we did here with him was great. It was amazing. So I haven't eaten at his restaurant, but we plan to soon.
You've eaten his food?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah.
Our friends, Presto Filippo's, they own the Spuntino and the Gourmet Italia place down there.
Another popular spot.
Yeah, another popular spot. I will say, though, our closest restaurant, and it's not just because of the name, it's because we've known them forever. They've since closed. but I've got to get a shout out to the Palumbos. We're not related. Everybody assumes that the Palumbo's Ristorante and the Palumbo's Winery was one and the same.
But they weren't.
They weren't, but it's just a small world. I've known them since I was a little kid.
Oh, wow.
But they're enjoying their retirement. So that was our go-to Italian because they were like family.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So
and
with
then,
a sad eye, you
I
weep
know,
their
I do.
departure, but
Yeah.
still know the friends. So it's good.
and you know, honestly, and then realistically, if you really look at who we are and what we do and our life, we have 4 kids and you know, hustle bustle. We're coming back from the sports, you know, kids in 2 sports right now, 3 sports other times.
Yep.
So running through La Cocina for a quick, you know, simple bite is
Some
somewhere
good
that you'll find.
old-fashioned Mexican food.
Yeah.
Down on 79.
Although what's the other one with the wicked margaritas over there, Guadalajara Grill.
Ah, I have not tried that one yet. We'll have to put that on the list.
Go Uber if you have their margaritas.
Always Uber, and that's another out here. It's almost always easy to get a Lyft, get an Uber when you're out here wine tasting for sure. You will want to do that so that you can partake and enjoy. So event-wise, the Valley is tons of events. Do you have a favorite event or two every year that you don't want to miss as a winemaker?
You know, the Crush event that happens every year. That's always that's a fun one. That's a good one. It's it just has a good feel to it.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. So before we say goodbye, because I forgot to ask it earlier and you reminded me, you guys are a California sustainable winery.
Yes.
So can you talk a little bit about what that means to you and kind of why you made that choice as a winemaker and a winery?
Yeah, interesting that you present it that way. Most everybody assumes that when you you choose to become sustainable, and honestly, in our case, we didn't choose to be sustainable. We found out after the fact that just about everything we do here, from our farming practices to our business practices.
You made those choices organically
It
and
happened
realized that
organically,
they
yeah.
fit in the box,
Yeah.
that you could check them all.
Exactly, and so we were doing this 100% we live here, so I wanted to have a good environment for my kids. We are concerned for our neighbors, which, you know, dictates our practices, as well as economically feasible. You know, so all of these things that we were doing to make the best quality wine, best quality grapes we could possibly do, turned out to be sustainable. And then, you know, fast forward several years, 10, 15 years of practicing sustainability, we find out that we're one of the you know, flagship or you know, spokespersons for small wineries, not just in Temecula, but more importantly throughout California, as one of the top you know, well-known sustainable vineyards and winery.
You just started out to do the right thing.
And all I want to do is do the right thing, yeah.
Yeah, that is so awesome. Well, this has been an absolute joy. Is there anything that I forgot to ask you that you're like, oh, Tania, I really want to make sure that I get this point or this out there?
No, you know what, I said, I did say a statement the other night, and somebody brought it to my attention that you know, that was really insightful about who we are and what we do. And I was alluding to another winery, but really it encompasses who we are. What we try to do here is make exceptional, honest wines for adults of all ages that aren't necessarily looking to us for entertainment. What they're looking for is a great bottle of wine that they can find, purchase, take home, and enjoy at their own entertainment. So we're not an entertainment facility, we're a winery, and we stay true to that.
Yeah, and you do that exceptionally well.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for taking time to be here. I'm going to do the week coming up and share what the events are. We'll say goodbye to you.
All right.
Thank you so much for
Thank
the
you
time.
very much.
It was a pleasure,
Yeah, no, it
Nicholas.
was a pleasure, and thank you guys for sticking around.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, and I see Kim Butler. Hi, Kim.
Hi, Kim.
All right. Well, thank you.
All right, thank you. He's going to go back to winemaking, and I'm going to scooch in here a little bit so I can see my computer and let you guys know what is coming up this week in the Temecula Valley. There are a lot of different events coming up, a lot happening. I also want to touch on the fact that there are a lot of boutique holiday shopping events coming up. I'm not going to necessarily go over those all with you, but just a reminder, especially as you're preparing for your holiday shopping, what a difference it makes to the families when you go out and support those small business vendor events. It really makes a difference to their holidays and is a way of keeping our dollars in the community. I know it is so easy to go on Amazon and get all that shopping done, and when you are busy and towards the end of your holiday shopping, that may be the only alternative. But right now we've got some time on our side, so definitely be sure to check out some of these small vendor events that are coming up throughout the valley. They are all listed on, or the ones I know about are listed on Wine Country Living. You can go to the page at Wine Country Living and also join the Facebook group Wine Country Living and find those events there. So coming up this weekend, we have Veterans Day next Monday, so there are a lot of Veteran Day events coming up. Marietta has their parade, their Veterans Day parade on Sunday, and now I am just scrolling through to make sure that I hit it. If you are a Stevie Ray Vaughan fan, at the Old Town Blues Pub in Old Town, they have a Stevie Ray Vaughan tribute. That is tomorrow night, so if you're looking for some midweek fun, that is a good one. There is a grand opening on Wednesday at Cumbia Mexican restaurant. I wasn't clear from this posting if it is a grand opening for the restaurant or if it is a grand opening event, because they are doing some salsa, it looks like, their Wednesday night. Again, if you were looking for some weekend fun, that should be good. And we have a holiday sip and shop on the 10th at the Akiko Orchards. That looks like it will be a fun event, wine tasting and shopping. How can you go wrong? And we have a Project Touch dinner. This is a fundraiser. I believe it is Saturday night. Is that the 10th? That is going to be at Temecula Creek Inn, supporting a great cause. They have a dinner and fundraiser that starts at 6 o'clock, hosted by Temecula, by Project Touch. A great way to have a fun evening and support a good local cause. And we've got a Japanese cooking class on Sunday night. So I believe that's Sunday. That's on the 11th Sunday. So Sunday afternoon at 1 o'clock. So that is going to be fun if you want to learn some new cooking techniques. Look for that. That is a decent roundup. I'm sure I missed a couple, but a decent roundup of what is coming up this week in the Temecula Valley. If you have an event you would like me to share, please let me know. Join the page, send me an email, Tania@ourwinecountryrealtor.com, and I will be sure to get it listed. If you know someone who would like this information, please share this video with them. If they don't know Temecula, this is a great conversation with local winemaker Nicholas. We had a wonderful historical discussion, kind of put some context around what's going on in Temecula, where we came from. It's a great video to share this with your friends. Let them know we're here. We're doing this Mondays at 1 o'clock. Spread the word and share the video. And we will be back again next week with another great guest, hopefully. Not scheduled yet, but if you would like or know someone who needs to be on Temecula Uncorked, please send them my way. Links will be above, it's above on Facebook, in the post to book as a guest, to join Wine Country Living, and for the page with all of the events listed. So thank you guys so much for sticking with us. I know we had a long conversation today, but I think we had some great insight from Nicholas. It was really great to have him. Hi Rachel, good to see you. Thanks for tuning in. And I am going to do a quick panorama before I say goodbye, so that those of you who do not know the valley, who might be tuning in, will get to see the lovely view that I've been enjoying this afternoon. So we're going to jump up and do that before we, oh, leave shot, sorry guys. Before we do that, and give you guys a good check it out. This is the lovely patio that you get to enjoy at Palumbo. So pretty, so scenic. Just love it. So thank you guys so much. Had a great conversation with Nicholas. Look forward to seeing you next week. Talk to you soon. Thank you for watching Temecula Uncorked. Have a good one.